This video is brought to you by Surfshark VPN. Stick around to learn more about how Surfshark lets you browse the web freely and securely. Plus, get 4 additional months for free when you sign up over at surfshark.com/skillup. Click below for that link or stick around to the end of the video to learn more. Gamers, welcome back to me. I'm home after a whirlwind trip to the US that took me to New York City for the Switch 2, to Seattle to go hands-on with Marathon, escaping the US just as the tariffs hit. Felt like Indiana Jones with his hat in that moment. But yes, it was an absolutely huge week and the coverage is beginning to roll out. Right now on the channel, you can see my hands-on Switch 2 impressions video. TLDR, the Switch 2 is no joke. A surprisingly competent piece of kit that's by no means cheap, but it does look to position Nintendo well for the next generation, even if the idea of the $80 AAA game feels very, very poorly timed, given everything going on in the world right now. Speaking of right now you're watching This Week in Video Games a day late due to all this content we're pumping out. Very soon, you'll have my hands-on impressions for Marathon. I spent the day at Bungie playing Marathon and speaking to members of the dev team, so do look forward to that impressions video. While I was there, I was also joined by Lucy and Jake from the Friends Per Second podcast. They too went hands-on with the game, and together we interviewed the game's director, Joe Ziegler, so do expect a special edition of the Friends Per Second podcast devoted entirely to Marathon coverage. Again, that'll be up pretty soon. So yeah, a huge amount of content to look forward to. So if you want to know the minute all that's live, then be sure to subscribe and ding the bell. Believe me when I tell you, I got some exciting stuff cooking in the background as well, but I'm not allowed to talk about that just yet, so stay tuned. All right, we're all caught up. So with that out the way, let's say we talk about the news. So I know that many of you deliberately tune out from the world of US politics because it's a lot, I get it. And I'm sure that more than a few of you view games as a bit of an escape from all that. So it brings me no pleasure whatsoever to inform you that Donald Trump has done the unthinkable. He made video games political. I'm talking, of course, about his Liberation Day tariffs, which plunged the world economy into turmoil last week. And yes, video games are the least of anyone's problems in a scenario like that, but this is a show about video games. So we're going to talk about the tariffs' impacts on video games. And what an impact it was. You'd no doubt already be aware that Nintendo had to suspend pre-orders for the Switch 2 console just a day after revealing it to the world. And the story behind that's a little crazy, actually. See, during the first Trump administration, a number of manufacturers became concerned that Trump would affect massive tariffs against China, and so to de-risk, a number of them diversified their supply chains away from China and toward other countries. In the case of Nintendo, they relocated a large portion of their manufacturing to Vietnam and Cambodia, since it would be highly unlikely that Trump would tariff those nations. But Trump is out here tariffing countries that are populated entirely by penguins. And so Vietnam and Cambodia did get tariffed to the tune of 46% and 49% respectively. China still manufactures a large number of Switch 2s, and they copped a 104% tariff, which means that Switch 2s that come in from over there are going to be like double the price in the US. Imagine having to pay between $650 to $900 for a brand new Switch 2. That is the reality that Nintendo was facing when it made the decision to suspend pre-orders. Things got even worse when the rest of North America was pulled into this mess. Both Walmart and GameStop in Canada announced that pre-orders for the Switch 2 would not begin on April 9th as planned in order to align with the timing of US pre-orders. They didn't provide an explanation as to why, but the speculation is that shipments into North America were likely going to be routed through the US, and that obviously wouldn't work if those units were being tariffed at an absurd rate before making that journey north. The ESA, the lobbying group representing game publishers in the US, issued a statement on the matter to GameFile. ESA Senior Vice President Aubrey Quinn said that these tariffs, quote, are going to have a real and detrimental impact on the video games industry, end quote, further warning that you shouldn't expect the impact of these tariffs to be localized to the Switch 2, because of course they won't be. They'll affect everything. Industry analyst Serkan Toto of Catan Games took a guess at what might be next for Nintendo if these tariffs weren't reversed. Quote, it is very difficult to predict, but Nintendo will likely take a few days to run simulations and then announce hikes, not only for the system itself, but also games and accessories. I hope I am wrong, but if sustained, these sky-high tariffs leave them no choice, end quote. Now, obviously, 2 days ago, Donald Trump caved on the tariffs, bowing to pressure from a bond market that was rapidly devaluing the US as a safe investment decision. For the next 90 days, these tariffs are now 10% across the board, except for China, where the tariff went up to a total of 145%. After that 90-day period expires, Trump may yet again plunge the global economy into turmoil if he feels like it. And I wish I was joking, but sadly that is the world that we live in. So when it comes to the Switch 2, where do things stand right now? Well, for starters, pre-orders have still not commenced in the US or Canada. Nintendo is still figuring out what their next steps might be, and they've issued no public statement on the matter since the abandonment of the more aggressive tariff plan. In the background though, it appears as though Nintendo are looking to move as many Switch 2 units from Vietnam and Cambodia into the US as they can. In fact, it appears as though they've been doing that for a while now, as Bloomberg are reporting that Nintendo moved over 1 million Switch 2 units into the US in January and February, no doubt nervous about the threat of tariffs, and boy oh boy were they spot on with that prediction. Going forward, it's likely that if you buy a Switch 2 in the US, it'll have been made in Vietnam and Cambodia, whereas if you buy it anywhere else, it'll probably have been made in China. It's unclear whether Vietnam and Cambodia's manufacturing capacity will be able to keep pace with US demand for Switch 2s, but I guess we are about to find out. Another very interesting tidbit shaking out of this same Bloomberg article came from Hideaki Yasuda of Tokyo Securities, who said, quote, Sony is in a tougher position as most of its PlayStation production is in China and it may be forced to hike PS5 prices in the US in the near future, end quote. So, if you are living in the US and you were thinking of buying a PS5 this year, then you better get in quick. Now, it's always risky to attribute any logic or forward thinking to anything that Trump does, but if we were to be generous, we might say that these tariffs were intended to onshore American manufacturing, encouraging companies to build factories in the US so that products could be made there, providing thousands of jobs to robots, if the Commerce Secretary is to be believed. Well, Polygon looked into this matter from the perspective of video game supply chains. They spoke to NYU professor Josh Foyde, and he said that even if Nintendo wanted to relocate its production elsewhere, quote, such a move would take years. By way of example, Apple has faced increased costs and risks due to its reliance on China dating back to the first Trump administration, and it has taken years to move even a fraction of its production to places like Vietnam and India, end quote. This is one of the biggest problems with these tariffs. Businesses like Nintendo do not have time to respond to the economic shock that they suddenly impose. Nor do they have the certainty to invest in building new supply chains, because when conditions change from one day to the next as they're doing right now, businesses will most often opt to do nothing, which is why the likelihood of a global recession looms so large, and why Morgan Stanley is forecasting a 60% chance of a recession in the US this coming year. So Nintendo is trying to weather the tariff storm as best they can, but they've also put themselves in a fair amount of hot water owing to the price tags they've attached to the console, the peripherals, the upgrades on Switch 1 games, and of course, the price of new release Switch 2 games. The console part of the equation is actually less controversial than you might think. At $450 US, this device is by no means cheap, but its technical specs are actually really impressive, and you can broadly see why Nintendo priced it the way they did. Still, it is a pricey unit, especially given all the current economic headwinds, but luckily, Doug Bowser has a suggestion for anyone not able to afford a Switch 2. Just buy the Switch 1, bro. Quote, we recognize there are some people that may not be able to afford the Switch 2's price point. That's why we wanted to make the other Switch platforms available, so people still have an opportunity to come into our gaming universe, be part of these characters in these worlds, and see value, if you will, in whatever rung they come in, end quote. Definitely shades of former Xbox boss Don Matrix suggesting that you should stick with the Xbox 360 if you don't want to have your Xbox One permanently connected to the internet. Legendary clip, that one. Nintendo is also copping a lot of flack over the Welcome to a Tech demo, which Nintendo was charging $10 US for. I've played this thing and I can tell you that it's a little bit of cute fun, but it's essentially an ad for the Switch 2, a console that you would have already purchased if you were playing this game. This will honestly go down as one of the most boneheaded decisions in console launch history, not because it's a big deal, but just because it's so stunning that Nintendo thought this would have been a good idea. The new C button on the controller is another disappointing aspect of the Switch 2. Turns out this button is just a toggle on the voice chat functionality that the console now supports, and it only works if you pay Nintendo $20 a year for Nintendo Online. Sure, that's not the only thing that comes included in that service. Putting voice chat behind a paywall is, frankly, extremely cringe. But the biggest thing to have disrupted the Switch 2 hype cycle, other than the tariffs, has been Nintendo pricing Mario Kart World at $80 US, a price point that makes it the first AAA new release to be above the $70 threshold that Sony brought us to a few years ago. This price point has caused so much backlash that Nintendo of America boss Doug Bowser has been forced to offer some justification for it. Here's what he told friend of the channel Gene Park, writing for the Washington Post, quote, we look at each game, really look at the development that's gone into into the game, the breadth and depth of the gameplay, if you will, the durability over time, and the replayability of gameplay experiences, those are all factors, and there's many more that go into consideration of what is the right price point for the game. So I think you can anticipate that there will be variable pricing, and we haven't set a benchmark. I can't speak for other games that might be released by other publishers or other platforms. It's more about what we think is right for our content, what is the right value for consumers as they come into our platform, end quote. That's a response that's left more than a few people pretty cold, since the current prevailing economic sentiment is that shit sucks and it's really only going to get worse. And look, the discussion about the $80 game is a big and complex one with so many variables going into it, but regardless of what you think, I think everyone can agree that now is not the right time to affect this sort of price increase, and everyone is just hoping that other publishers don't take it as their cue to push the price up on their new releases. Still, there was one piece of good news coming out of the post-direct news cycle. Turns out that Switch 2 upgrade cartridges will contain Switch 2 editions of the game after all, well, mostly. The background to all of this is that last week there was some reporting that if you bought a physical edition of something like Tears of the Kingdom Switch 2 edition, you'd actually be buying a Switch 1 cartridge that would come with a download code for the upgrade. That obviously would have sucked for a bunch of reasons, but it turns out that's not quite the case. Nintendo provided a statement directly to us saying, quote, "Physical versions of Nintendo Switch 2 edition games will include the original Nintendo Switch game and its upgrade pack all on the same card. Alternatively, some publishers may release Nintendo Switch 2 edition games as download codes in physical packaging with no game card," end quote. So it seems like Nintendo are committing to doing this properly while leaving third parties to make up their own minds, which I guess is fair. I just hope that third party publishers follow Nintendo's lead, because download codes are hell not only for resale value but also for game preservation. Plus, it's just nice to have a cartridge for, whenever you get a little snacky. You know what I'm talking about. A quick lightning round to finish off. Nintendo aren't the only gaming company being affected by tariffs in the short term. Gaming hardware manufacturer Razer has announced that they're pausing direct laptop sales in the US just ahead of their launching the Razer Blade 16. When asked by The Verge why the pre-orders for the new device were suspended, Razer refused to provide a clear answer, saying only, quote, "We do not have any comment at this stage regarding tariffs," end quote. CD Projekt Red has absorbed a new studio into itself. So this isn't actually as interesting as it sounds, since the studio in question, Molasses Flood, was actually acquired by CD Projekt Red back in 2021. Back then they were working on a multiplayer Witcher spin-off going by the name Codename Sirius, as in why so. The project got rebooted in 2023, resulting in 30 developers being laid off. Work on it continued though, and it appears as though that work will still continue. Only now the people working on it at Molasses Flood will officially become CD Projekt Red employees. One person who won't make that transition though is co-founder and principal architect on Project Sirius, Damien Isler. They're moving on to other things, but they said that Project Sirius is in good hands. Quote, "To be ultra clear, this is a good and healthy thing for the studio, and it was long expected. It breaks down some organizational barriers and better integrates the Molasses Flood team with the rest of the amazing CD Projekt Red org. Overall, it shows a very bright future for Project Sirius, aka the multiplayer Witcher game of which I was the design director for 3 years. It's going to be an amazing game, one for the books, and I cannot wait until the rest of the world learns about what we've been working on," end quote. Very intrigued to learn more about this one, not gonna lie. The Oblivion remake is shadow dropping any day now. That's according to industry insider Jeff Grubb, who's been teasing this for quite some time, saying, quote, "I've been told it's gonna shadow drop at any moment this month. It's gonna be shadow dropped pretty soon," end quote. Can't wait to violate the law once again. Death Stranding is getting a film adaptation because, of course it is. It's being produced by A24, an outfit that Kojima has voiced considerable admiration for in the past, and it's being led by Michael Sanoski, who wrote and directed that really good Pig movie. No, not Babe, and no, not Babe 2, Pig in the City. I'm talking about that one with Nick Cage, though to be super clear, Babe absolutely clears that. Anyway, no date for this one yet, but don't expect it anytime soon. Some quick sales numbers to finish off. The Minecraft movie made $300 million in its opening weekend. In the words of Red Letter Media, "When will the Lord take me?" Speaking of financial results that make you sad, Star Citizen has now crowdfunded over $800 million. Thankfully, they celebrated the milestone by finally announcing a 1.0 release date. And obviously, I'm fucking with you because that game is never coming out. More encouragingly, Inzoi has sold through 1 million units in its first week since launch. It's meant to be pretty good. Not necessarily a replacement for die-hard Sims fans, but definitely has the right foundations to start competing with EA's Behemoth if the team sticks with it. And after 1 million sales in the first week alone, I can imagine the dev team is feeling pretty good about the future. It's available right now on Steam. No word for other platforms just yet. So what got announced or delayed this week? Well, we got our first Switch 2 game announcement outside of the Direct, and it's an indie title, which is interesting interesting since there's been a bit of reporting going around last week about how not a lot of indies were getting Switch 2 dev kits. Turns out the studio behind it told Eurogamer that they started development as soon as the teaser trailer for the console dropped in January, and everyone had a hunch that the Switch 2 would support mouse controls. It's a multiplayer party game called Mousework, and it comes from Nitrome, a studio that's done about 1,000 mobile and web games that are used to rapid development. They most recently made the pretty good Shovel Knight roguelike spin-off Shovel Knight Dig. As you can imagine, this one is built around mouse controls for the Switch 2, and it involves a bunch of mini games where you use the mouse in different ways, drawing bad MS Paint pictures, closing pop-up ads, a very useful skill if you've ever visited a website in 2025. Up to 4 players for this one, no release date just yet. Another new game announcement that got overshadowed by all the Switch 2 talk was Malice, which comes from Summerfall Studios, the Australian developers behind Stray Gods, a role-playing musical, which featured an absolutely stacked voice cast finally utilizing their latent singing abilities in a video game. Malice sounds very different though. It's a narrative-driven, gothic-themed roguelike deck builder, and just in case you weren't aware, on Summerfall's dev team is David Gator, the lead writer of Dragon Age 1 and 2, and designer of Baldur's Gate 2, Neverwinter Nights, and Knights of the Old Republic, so that's their X-factor in this stack genre. They say the game is basically finished, though they are running a Kickstarter campaign to fund the final push. No release date just yet, and it's PC only at this stage. Remember when Power World developer Pocket Pair said they were getting into game publishing and said they'd been completely inundated with pitches from developers? Well, they've announced the first game on their slate now, and it's a little game called Truckful from Polish studio Mythic Owl. Seems like these folks have been around for a little while now, making a variety of edutainment and family-friendly titles, but moving into more gamey games now. Truckful is an adventure game where you play a truck driver running errands for a village, and it looks very bright and cozy at first, but there's apparently a deeper, darker mystery to uncover in the surrounding woods as well. Looks lovely. There's already been some very positive previews for this one prior to the publishing announcement, and of course there is an inventory management jigsaw element, so it's basically a winner already. Hey, remember when we mentioned a bunch of April Fool's jokes during the feel-good section last week, some of which turned out to be actual real things that you could play or buy, some of which were definitely fake, and some of which we weren't really sure about at first. Well, one of the things in the we weren't sure about it pile was Hoyoverse announcing Zenless Zone Zero for Xbox, something the community were like, haha, of course this is fake. Well, it's not. The character action game is coming to Xbox, and they're going to reveal more in a live stream on Friday, April 11th. Free to play, but it is a gacha game, which is like, you know, all the worst monetization forms Voltroned into one, so do tread carefully. A couple of release date announcements now. Remember La Chimera, the co-op cyberpunk first-person shooter from the Metro studio previously known as 4A Games Ukraine? Feels like this was announced not so long ago, and now it's coming out very soon, April 25th. This gave off the impression of a big AAA blockbuster when it was first revealed, but it's worth noting that the price of this one is surprisingly low, about $30 US, just PC for this one, at least at this stage. Remember that crafting survival game set on a bunch of floating islands in the sky? When I say it back, I realize that really doesn't nail it down at this point. I'm talking about the one from Surgeon Simulator developer Bossa Studios called Lost Skies. This one releases into early access on April 18th. Bossa has had 2 waves of layoffs in the past couple of years, so hopefully this one goes well for them. Certainly looks nice, but man, there are a lot of survival games these days. PC only for this one. And finally, Monster Train 2, the sequel to the roguelike deck builder that managed to hold its own against Slay the Spire a few years back, now has a release date of May 21st this year. This one comes out on PC and all console platforms from the get-go, so they're clearly looking to make a big splash with this one. Looking forward to seeing how this genre develops in a post-Balatro world. So what came out last week? Well, here's one we missed from last week's show on account of its release date being moved up. Korra. It's a hand-drawn indie narrative adventure game about a person and a rescued dog, published by Don't Nod, the studio behind Life is Strange. This one landed quite strongly, an 83 on OpenCritic. Here's Checkpoint Gaming, who gave it an 8.5 out of 10, saying, quote, touching fable of companionship, Korra is a strong debut title whose thoughtful design belies simple presentation. Its charming use of music over dialogue, affection for small, quiet moments, and simple but clever mechanics create an affecting journey through and with nature, end quote. Sounds like a good chaser to the likes of Never. From small to big, let's see how that Last of Us Part 2 remaster landed on PC. It's sitting at very positive on Steam with 4,500 reviews counted, 88% of them positive. A couple of folks noting some issues, but it seems like there isn't anything particularly drastic with this PlayStation port. Man, these really are a coin flip sometimes, aren't they? A lot of the reviews echo Digital Foundry's take, which is to say that this one came out a hell of a lot better than Part 1 did when it launched on PC. Digital Foundry noticed some pretty surprising loads on the CPU, however, as well as some stuttering problems here and there, but their biggest takeaway was that even compared to the PS4 version of the game, the port was not really pushing things in the way that other PC ports can and do. On the other end of the scale, it's Steam Deck verified, so there's that. Moving on to Katamari Damacy Rolling Live, which is the first new Katamari game in like 8 years. Hard to find reviews out for this one given that it's an Apple Arcade exclusive, but Ed thought it was pretty good. Captures the right vibes and silliness of the series, designed for short play sessions, some inventive new stages, and you can still use a controller for that traditional feel. Worth noting that user reviews on the App Store mostly complained about the touch controls. Digital Trends was one of the few who wrote about it and said much the same thing, adding this worthwhile tidbit, quote, "At this point, it feels like Apple Arcade is becoming a go-to home for classic oddball franchises that just no longer fit into the AAA landscape. I've loved watching series like Puyo Puyo and Choo Choo Rocket get a second wind on Apple Arcade since it started. It's a platform for gaming's greatest misfits, and Katamari Damacy Rolling Live is the king of them," end quote. South of Midnight Time Now, which is the latest exclusive offering from Xbox, and this one has landed pretty strongly with an open critic of 78. I mentioned my thoughts on this one in the preview build a few times now, and it seems as though those sentiments have been shared by other reviewers. Great world, great characters that overshadow the very mid-combat stuff. IGN gave this one 8 out of 10. Here's what they had to say, quote, "South of Midnight is a straightforward but well-executed action-adventure game on the surface with a simple but satisfying mix of combat and platforming. It's focused, filling out its 12-hour runtime nicely without ever dragging or relying on unnecessary padding. Beyond those basics, however, is a certain heart and artistry that elevates the whole package, inviting you to peer into the deep American South through its folklore, nature, and culture. It might not be the most profound exploration of family life, but it's delivered in ways that feel authentic," end quote. Worth also shouting out PC Gamer's review that was written by a critic that actually hails from the Deep South, where the game is set. They gave this one 83 out of 100, saying, quote, "It's not a few hours of kitschy antebellum aesthetics, sanitized bedtime stories, or exploitative violence. It's a supernatural tale with magic powers and creatures, but that doesn't stop it from being an earnest, empathetic look at the often forgotten stretch of land between eastern Texas and the Atlantic seaboard by a team that truly must give a damn. It's given me this feeling that I can only describe as what must be the video game equivalent of a really big hug. I don't know if I've ever experienced something so sincerely devoted to the people and places I call home, but I'll be damned if this isn't my new bar for how it should look," end quote. Quite the endorsement there. Austin's taken a deeper look at this one right now for the channel, but if you like the sound of all this, then of course it's on Game Pass, so go check it out right now. So what's coming out this week? Well, we're gonna have to pick up the pace right now because this week's got a shotgun blast of indie bangers we've called out on the show before, and then some. Let's start with Velev, which has just launched into early access as a mashup of two genres, MOBA and Extraction, aka one of the most PC-coded games you can get. Interested in the thrill of Extraction, but you're bad at shooting stuff? This might be your jam. Honestly, I'm not entirely convinced that this kind of top-down format and more distance gameplay can match the thrills that comes from the best Extraction shooters, so I'll be very interested to see how well this is received. Here's another incredibly PC-coded game launching into early access, Hollywood Animal, a tycoon management game about managing a movie studio during Hollywood's golden age, with its big shtick being the ability to tap into the underworld forces to put the heat on rival studios, just like back in the old days. A lot of wish lists for this one off the back of a well-received demo. This one's out on Thursday, April 10th. And man, April 10th is proving to be an absolutely stacked day. The biggest one to keep an eye on for, if the reviews are any indication, is Blueprints. Reviews have just dropped for this one, and it's shot to the very top of 2025's best reviewed titles, leaping over Split Fiction and Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. We featured this one on our Put This On Your Radar segment before. It's an indie puzzle game that's kind of like if Myst were a roguelite. You're exploring a mysterious mansion whose rooms shift with each run, and need to slowly peel back multiple layers of puzzles and mysteries as you go in search of a missing room, or at least that's the initial goal. Critics are saying that this one is incredibly deep and can last 60 hours or more, which seems very strange for this kind of game, but Stu and Ed are in the middle of playing through it, and they assure me that this one really doesn't let up. Big tip of the iceberg kind of situation here. We'll dive deeper into the reviews next week. This one's out on PC, Mac, PS5, Xbox Series consoles, as well as Game Pass, so definitely worth taking a look. Another big April 10th release we featured on Radar a couple of weeks ago is Promise Mascot Agency, which has just landed to strong reviews. This is a new narrative adventure game from Kaizen Gameworks, who did the zany detective game Paradise Killer a while back. This one's even zanier, involving sentient costume characters, an ex-Yakuza, a cursed town, and a flying pickup truck. Half visual novel, half management game, and a whole lot of very strange vibes. This one's coming to all platforms. Monaco 2 also launches on April 10th. The original Monaco was a really big hit during the 2010s indie boom, a pixel art heist simulator where things would often go wrong, and the fun was in dealing with the consequences. Imagine Payday, but a lot wackier and with a hilarious honky-tonk piano soundtrack. Anyway, the sequel has been in development all this time and is much higher fidelity, is a much more involved co-op heist planning experience, but the core of improvising and shooting at your friends when things go wrong is still very much key. Hoping this one lands really well. It's coming to all platforms bar Switch. Hey, remember this one? Star Overdrive? This one was featured in a Nintendo Direct a while back, and it looked kind of interesting. Imagine Breath of the Wild, but you had a hoverboard to jet around on. That's basically what this one's going for here. Exploration, combat, puzzles, the lot. Interestingly, this one's coming out on Switch this week, though there is a Steam release planned for later in the year. For now, though, the Switch version will arrive on April 10th. One more for the 10th, the Talos Principle Reawakened is coming to PC, PS5, and Xbox Series consoles. This is the remastered version of the first Talos Principle game, and honestly, these first-person puzzle games are really good. If you like games in the vein of Portal with some very stunning scenery to look at while you squeeze your brain, definitely check this one out. Still think this was an amazing pivot from the team that made Serious Sam to go from a game where literally all you do is gun down hundreds of screaming enemies to a game where there is no combat whatsoever and you have to use your brain for everything. Inside us, there are 2 wolves and all that. Jumping over to April 14th now, this one is Forever Skies, a crafting and survival game set in the sky. And yes, it's different from the one we mentioned earlier and different from the 6 other skybound survival games coming out in the next little while. This one is a first-person game and has a focus on building up airships to get off the polluted Earth, surviving by somehow escaping the suffocating smog clouds, kind of like a trip to LA. This one's launching into version 1.0 after being in early access for almost 2 years. User reviews are very positive overall. I've checked this one out myself and can confirm it's quite good. Really hoping that 1.0 launch lands well. If you don't watch this next one carefully, you'd swear you were playing Advance Wars on the GBA. In fact, it doesn't matter how carefully you look at it, it's always going to look like Advance Wars. This one's called Warside, and it's exactly what you think it is. Another attempt to make the best Advance Wars like to fill the hole that Nintendo have left wide open. Really good response to the demo for this one. It's going straight into a full release with a campaign, multiplayer, and a map editor for what will hopefully be an avid community. 15th of April for PC only. Quick shout out to Lost Records Bloom and Rage Tape 2, which releases on April 15th as well for PC, PS5, and Xbox Series consoles. If you've played the first half of Don't Nod's latest narrative game, then you probably want answers, and you are entitled to them, so go get them. And finally, ending on a chill note, April 15th also brings lush foil photography sim from Annapurna Interactive and solo Aussie developer Matt Newell. This is a very tranquil photography game that boasts a bunch of very highly detailed environments rendered in Unreal 5, letting you complete a checklist of challenges with your in-game DSLR camera or drone, or just explore at your own pace and soak up the atmosphere in locations like Australia, Iceland, France, Nepal, Japan, and more. Looks absolutely stunning, some seriously promising virtual tourism opportunities here. Now you can see for yourself why Australian beaches are the best in the world. I'm not at all biased. I grew up in Bondi. You can't blame me. Look, quite a few games should be on your radar, but we thought we'd give the spotlight to one of the smaller, but no less intriguing indie games coming out this week. I know you were just enjoying that Unreal Engine 5 footage, so let's dial it right down with this.
Welcome to the company. You will need to collect.
This is a game called Repose, a game that's part dungeon crawler, part survival horror game, with a greater overarching mystery about a messed up corporation wrapped up in a striking 1-bit art style. This is the kind of survival game where every input needs to be considered carefully. You're asked to deep dive into a mysterious facility without knowing what the hell is going on there, so naturally it's incredibly hazardous. Traps and enemies can spring up almost instantaneously, and even though it feels like a turn-based dungeon crawler, reflexes and quick thinking are definitely required. And needless to say, this one has some very eerie vibes. Repose comes out on April 14th for PC, and there's a free demo if you're curious about it. You can follow the link to it over on our Steam Curator page, which also has links to all of the other Put This On Your Radar stuff we've recently covered. I'll leave a link to all of that below the like button. Sort of free stuff time now, and over on the Epic Store, their last mystery game ended up being the breezy action RPG Cat Quest 2. So if you like that Cat Quest 1 freebie, then boy, were you in luck. Next game on offer is Arcadegeddon, which is a free-to-play third-person roguelike shooter, but it appears they're giving away some currency next week on the Epic Store. Fair enough. The other is Idle Champions of the Forgotten Realms, which is another free-to-play game. This one is an idle strategy management game based on the D&D universe. You'll get Astarion from Baldur's Gate 3 for free during the same period. On Xbox Game Pass, they announced a bunch of great stuff for the first half of April. Leading the charge is Diablo 3 Reaper of Souls Ultimate Edition, which is available on both PC and console. There's also South of Midnight, which launches day and date, as we mentioned earlier, as does Commandos Origins, a real-time stealth tactics game we mentioned last week. Also, as mentioned, Blueprints launches on April 10th, so definitely get stuck into that one. And on April 15th, they're adding Hunt Showdown, aka the greatest extraction shooter on the market for my money, which in this case is almost no money, along with the return of Grand Theft Auto 5, just in case you're one of the 4 people on planet Earth who hasn't yet played it. And finally, Prime Gaming is not letting up on its offerings this month. Right now, you can pick up a gold code for Mafia 3 Definitive Edition, as well as a code for Minecraft Legends on Xbox and PC, which is kind of surprising. 4X game Endless Space is also playable via the Amazon Games app. They've also got some good stuff coming up later this month too, like gold codes for Blood Omen Legacy of Kain, Thief Gold, and Berserk Boy, platformer which only came out last year and was very well received. Plenty of smaller offerings on there too, so definitely have a browse if you have a Prime membership. Earlier in the show, we mentioned old mate Don Matrick, and it reminded me of a story we saw a little while ago that would be perfect for our feel-good story for the week. Well, maybe not perfect, since this is more feel creepy rather than feel good. Regardless, doesn't matter. Remember the Kinect? Sure you do. It was that thing that Microsoft said was absolutely integral to their vision of the Xbox One, until such time as no one liked it, at which point it was no longer integral. Well, the Kinect has gone on to have a long life as a commercial product because it's actually a really good motion sensing camera, but it turns out that most recently it's found a new lease on life. It's being used as honest to goodness ghost hunting equipment. I'm not making this up, by the way. The Verge did a great write-up on this, so full credit to them. They dove deep into the demand for a product known as a structured light sensor, which people are selling on eBay for around $500, and it's essentially just a Kinect on a stick. And then ghost hunting YouTubers use this thing because the Kinect is designed to spot human-shaped objects and then convert that data into an image visible on a screen, like a tablet. And it is producing results for these YouTubers. So the question is, how the fuck is the Kinect able to see ghosts? Well, the bad news, sort of, is that obviously it can't. The Kinect is designed to look for human-shaped things, and when it looks at geometry, lighting, smoke, whatever, it's gonna try to tell you that what it's seeing is a human figure, even when it clearly isn't. That makes it a pretty useless piece of kit if you're actually on the hunt for ghosts, but an invaluable piece of kit if you're making YouTube videos trying to convince people that ghosts are real. I do wonder if the Switch 2's camera will go on to have life as a paranormal investigation tool. As long as you don't mind seeing your ghost at 6 frames a second, I expect it's going to come in very handy indeed. Alright, ladies and gents, that's all from me this week. A huge show in the midst of a huge week of content, so I hope you enjoyed yourself. Please do like the video, subscribe, ding the bell, all that jazz. Stay tuned for those marathon impressions going up in a bit, plus that special edition of the Friends Per Second podcast, where we sit down with the game's director, Joe Ziegler. Plus, we'll also have a regular edition of the podcast next week as well, where we drill down into the Switch 2, so be on the lookout for that as well. For now, folks, thanks again for watching, and a big thanks to this video's sponsor, Surfshark VPN. Let me tell you about the most recent time I used this video sponsor, Surfshark VPN. So you might have seen that I recently reviewed Destiny Rising, the mobile game currently in closed alpha testing. So the thing about that game is that it's not yet available in Australia. So even though NetEase invited me to play, I wasn't able to access any of the servers because I was geo-locked from being able to play on the US-based servers. Well, not if Surfshark has anything to say about it. Surfshark has a fantastic, absolutely seamless and super user-friendly mobile app, so all I had to do was boot it up, select a US server, connect to it, and in seconds, that geo wall evaporated, and I was able to connect to Destiny Rising without any problems at all. That is how quick, easy, and seamless it is to use Surfshark, and I use it so often at this point because the net is getting more and more carved up by all these geo-locks. Like, I was just in the States and I wanted to connect to an Australian-based streaming platform called Binge so I could watch The Sopranos for like the 80th time, but because I was in the US, the app wouldn't let me connect. So again, on my iPad, I just booted up Surfshark, connected to an Australian server node, and boom, gabagool all night long. There's also the security angle too, since Surfshark VPN encrypts your data, making it safer to browse the internet. Surfshark even offers a complete security package, including stuff like antivirus and anti-malware tools, real-time reports if a company that has some of your personal data gets hacked, and even a masked email generator that lets you create dummy emails when you want to sign up to something without having to hand over your actual email address. And yeah, there is also the online shopping angle, where access to regional pricing can get you some tidy discounts depending on what you're buying and where you're buying it from. Best of all, Surfshark is incredibly affordable. I really recommend clicking the link below and just seeing how inexpensive it is to properly protect yourself online and get all these benefits. For real, if this gives you access to just one regional pricing discount, that's going to go a long way towards this paying for itself. It's insane value given the freedom, discounts, and peace of mind. And if you sign up at surfshark.com/skillup, you can get an additional 4 months for free. That's surfshark.com/skillup for a handsome holiday discount and 4 additional months for free. You'll find that link below in the description and the pinned comment. Thanks Surfshark for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.